Since 1951, this is The Legend. 105.3, 95.3, WDXE.
Yes, indeed, WDXE, that's us. It is time for Friends and Neighbors with yours truly, and my friend and neighbor today is a longtime friend, Mr. Lewis Thomas. How are you, buddy?
Better than I deserve.
Yeah, aren't we all?
Yes, sir.
Aren't we
Yes,
all?
sir.
Lewis Thomas, I don't remember exactly how long I've known you, but probably at least since high school.
Yeah.
Probably at least since high school. And,
72 is when we moved to
did you move to
Lawrenceburg.
Lawrenceburg in 72?
Sure.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So you were, where were y'all from?
Well, I was born and raised in Shreveport. Dad was born here,
Yeah.
but he ended up in Shreveport because they had a charity hospital.
Okay, well, time out just a minute. For those who don't know, your dad was Dr. Henry Thomas.
That's right.
Dr. Henry Thomas, who was much beloved here in the county for a long, long time. Doctor here, I no telling how many times I saw him, and we went to Dr. Thomas, and of course he came back here in 72. But I didn't know he was really originally born here.
Yeah, well, he was born in South Carolina.
Okay.
My grandparents came here in the early 30s.
Okay. Now, who were they?
NG and Mary Thomas.
Really?
And
So
yeah,
you got deep roots here.
well, fairly, not as deep as some, but
Yeah.
Granddad came here, I think it was with the New York life insurance after the Depression. Somehow this New York life insurance ended up with a lot of farmland.
Yes.
And his job was to get the land back in the hands of farmers. And so that's what he did. Most of those guys are passed on now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I've had many say, your granddad showed up and said, look, if you'll take this 100 acres and buy you 2 mules, you'll pay for this land in 5 years. And they said,
And what was his name again?
his name was NG.
NG. Now, I've heard of him.
Nathan, Gerard. He went by Mr. NG.
How about that? What part of the county did he live? Do you know?
They lived right there where we live now.
Oh, really?
They bought that house.
So just east of Lawrenceburg.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And about 45 years ago or so, more than that, maybe I bought it from my grandmother.
Okay. All right. So
And
you connected really well to your past there.
Yeah, I want that to stay at that little old family farm that we still have, just trying to keep it in the family. And
Yeah. I don't blame you.
my daughter now, I've sold the house to her,
Yeah.
and I moved down, built me a little cabin in the hay barn.
Well, good deal. Well, good deal. Well, now, so your dad, Dr. Thomas, can you review his story as much as you can, because I guess you say he was born in
South Carolina.
South. So your dad. So
He was 5 years old when they moved to Lawrence County.
okay. So they moved to Lawrence County when he was just young.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So he grew up here. Then,
He did.
pretty much.
He did.
So he grew up here. Then and then where did you know where he went to school and what?
Yeah,
how his life took shape.
He went to University of Tennessee and UT Med School, and he really always wanted to come back here and farm, but Shreveport, Louisiana had a charity hospital, and he knew that if he went there, he could get all the practice
Yeah.
because back in those days, you might have 2 people in one bed with a board between them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so Dad, he just wanted to go somewhere where he could do a lot of surgery.
Okay. Yeah.
And he ended up being a partner with Dr. Wallace Brown down in Shreveport. When I was 15, he came in and said, how'd you like to move to Tennessee? I said, I wouldn't. And he said, well, get ready. We're going. My grandparents' health was failing some, and actually my granddad passed away the spring before we came in the fall.
Okay. All
in
right.
72.
Then you were 15.
I was.
Now you were the oldest of how many?
I was the second.
No, you're the second. Okay.
Yeah, there's six kids, and
6.
yeah,
Okay.
had 3 boys, 3 girls, and so Dad would have had 10 if he could have, I think.
Now, he met your mom, I guess, in Louisiana?
No, he actually met Mom while he was in Memphis. She was in nursing school, and he was in med school.
Okay, so she's Memphis.
She is actually Athens, Tennessee.
Okay.
McMinn County.
Okay. Very good, very good. So you had, now, of course, I'm more familiar with you and with Nathan and with Becky.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't.
My older brother, Jerry, he passed away with the ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was me, and then June, and Mary Beth, and Becky, and Nathan.
Okay, all right. So now I got you straight. So at 15 years old, you moved to Lawrenceburg.
I did.
Yeah. Now, was there a connection with Coach Adams and your
Sure.
dad? That's what I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
Because I think there was. And how did that come to be?
Well, Coach, they lived one door down from us on the street we lived on in Shreveport. We all kind of lived out in the country, but anyway, so Dad and Coach got to be good friends, and Coach was he was actually coaching at Woodlawn High School where Terry Bradshaw went.
Yeah.
And then the population grew because of Western Electric, which is now AT&T in our area.
Yeah.
And they needed a new high school, so Coach became the head football coach at Southwood High School.
Okay.
And that's where I went, and you know, I don't know. The Adams family came here in a couple of years after we did.
Yeah.
And they just been lifelong friends.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I remember you, I guess, from high school, and of course Bill and his family. And,
Yeah.
We had Bill in here visiting with us a while back, and of course, so Dr. Thomas came. Now, he came already a doctor, already a practice.
Oh yeah.
And opened up here as a surgeon and a doctor.
He did. He left a practice in Shreveport, and honestly, we saw more of him the first year that we were here than we ever had, because in Louisiana he'd leave before daylight, come home after we were in bed, and
Yeah.
Both he and his partner were workaholics, and and his office was an hour from the house, and so we got here, and eventually he opened up, and things were, I guess, slow at first, and but then he couldn't help himself as far as his work ethics. He instilled that in us. He used to tell me nobody needs more than 4 hours sleep a night.
I don't know. I may resemble that remark. That's amazing. Well, I do remember that you would see him if you happened to be at the hospital or whatever. You'd see him any hour of the day or night.
Right.
At the hospital, and of course he had his practice. Was he always on Buffalo Road? Did he start right there, or was there?
He did.
Did he start right there on Buffalo Road?
I think the nursing home, NHC, I think the old hospital was there at that time.
Right. Yeah, the old hospital was right there. That's where the hospital was, right to where NHC is now.
Yeah.
Brink Street. So I guess it made sense for him to have an office pretty close.
I guess so.
He could trot right across
Yeah.
Buffalo Road there.
Yeah.
So what was life like for you and your family when you moved to Lawrenceburg? What did it feel like for you as a 15-year-old?
Well, as a
whole new thing.
Back then, there weren't a lot of families moving into Lawrenceburg back in those days. And of course, rumors start, and they had me built up to be some great football star, and I was such a letdown to them when I came. But it was good. It was left a high school of 3,000 and came to a high school of about 800, and everything was different. But looking back, Lawrenceburg's a great place to be.
Yeah, we think so. Of course, I I've born and raised and always been here, but I've got to visit a few places. I always wanted to come home, though.
Yeah.
I always wanted to come home.
Yeah.
Well, you've been here and your family's been here long enough that Lawrence County is truly home.
It is.
No doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about
Yeah.
it. No doubt. Now, so you graduated. You started high school.
I'm 74.
You graduated 74.
Yeah.
So you probably were a senior as I came in.
Okay.
Because I graduated 79. And so you were the ones that were mean to the freshmen.
Well, that was, we didn't do the kind of things down in Shreveport. They were that high school was very strict, and Lawrence County was too. But they allowed the pant dropping,
Yes.
of freshmen. I couldn't figure that out. Why you want to do that to somebody? But,
Yeah, we just did.
just something that went on. But
Yeah.
it was it was a great experience.
Yeah. Now let's see. Was the new high school there when you first came in?
Yeah.
The
It was
new
about
high
a year or two old.
Yeah, it hadn't been there long.
Right.
So the new high school was there, and I remember when I came, they had just built the vocational center.
Okay.
The vocational center was new
Yeah.
on my freshman year.
Okay.
So they were, I guess, that had been in the works and in planned, that kind of thing.
It's hard to believe that high school's over 50 years old.
Yeah, I know. It is. It is. It really is. Still seems to be in relatively good shape. It does. Well, listen, so of course, I didn't know you all that well. I knew of you, I guess. But were you a good student? Did you make it?
Not really.
I really wasn't.
Not really.
I really
Yeah.
wasn't. I struggled through school and made it barely.
I did. I tell you, I had the attention deficit before they knew what that was, I guess. And I'll be honest with you, I was failing senior English, which you got to have.
Which you got to have, yeah.
And the reason was I would read something, but then I would never know what I read. And one day, Miss Green, she came in and said, Columbia State is having a poetry writing contest, and I would love for some of y'all to enter. Miss Green, our senior English teacher.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought, well, I can write a poem. I wrote a poem, and it got second place, and Miss Green gave me an A in English.
Oh, I'll be dogged.
So that was my salvation to get out of high school.
Do you remember the poem?
I've got it tucked away somewhere. I couldn't quote it right now. There's been many poems since that time.
Oh, I was going to ask you about it. Is that something that you continue to do, maybe?
I don't as much now. It's kind of strange how they can come and go.
Right.
I started writing some songs 20-something years ago, and actually had a couple of them published.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, well, they were used. A song called "When Will We Cry" was used. The Southern Baptists had this World Hunger Fund.
Yeah.
That if they had little rice bowls they sent out every year, and people put their change in it, but one year they made that song the theme of their fundraising.
Yeah.
And so that was,
that's pretty special.
But it was a bunch of country bumpkins going up to a studio in Nashville, and not knowing what we were doing. But and then the state of Arkansas used a song, "What If I'd Give All," just for one of their hunger
wow
things. So
well, I'm going to have to obtain that from you, maybe, and give a listen to some of that at some point.
Well,
you may have to share that with us one day.
Yeah, I can get that.
You may have to share that with us one day. I didn't know that. So you grew up, graduated high school, and what was right after high school for you?
Well, my best friend, Terry Beecham.
Yeah.
he came. He said, "You want to be a cop?" And I said, "I get to carry a gun?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, I'm in." I thought, man, get me off the farm, you know.
Yeah.
But so I really joined the reserve of the Lawrenceburg Police Department.
Right out of high school.
Yeah, and
Amazing.
It was frightening now when you think back, but we worked third shift and get home at 6. Dad would be calling to get me up at 10, and get out on the farm and work, you know. And but I did that a couple of years. Started Columbia State. Dad always was pulling me to the farm. He really wanted me to.
Well, tell me the farm. You say the farm. Tell me about the farm.
Well, oh gosh, we
y'all row cropping or
we had beef cattle.
Yes.
A lot scattered all over the county for years, and we started a dairy in '78, and we were row cropping some for that, and we in the '80s were a really tough time for a lot of folks. Agriculture really tough. Our interest rate went from 9% to 20%.
Yeah.
And price of milk was low, and it was a tough time. But we farmed through that, and in the whole scheme of things or the process, I started a little feed business to try to supplement too, but so there were just a lot of entities in that, from dairy, row crop, and beef. It was enough to make you work 18-hour days. I can tell you that.
You were a busy guy.
We were.
Your dad must have. You said he was that workaholic type. So
yeah.
And he expected you to be that too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he did. I mean, if you don't love what you do, especially Dad loved what he did.
Yeah.
He really, whether he got paid or not didn't seem to matter, and he just loved what he did.
Yep.
And I guess I'm the only one of 6 kids that stayed on the farm, so to speak.
Right.
Or had much to do with it. Now Becky used to have to come help me milk before school.
Right.
We'd milk about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and to get done where she could get to school. That's not one of her favorite time. My sister.
Yeah. Now I think she was actually younger than me.
She might have been. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. She was. I don't know. I remember her.
She married Philip Baggett. They're the same age.
I remember Philip.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did. Now where are they living now?
They're in Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
Shoals.
They've retired and live on the lake down there, and
well, good deal. Very
active in their church.
Good deal. Well, you farmed, you worked. Now, what happened to the police part?
There again, my dad was he didn't really enjoy me doing that, and so there was always a little bit of a pull on that. So I, after 2 years of college, I gave up the law enforcement, and that's when we started the dairy.
Yeah.
And that consumed all of me.
So you were in that neck deep. That was you.
For about 10 years.
That was you. Now, when did you fall in love?
Oh my, well, Donna was 2 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
And she came home from school. She was a special ed teacher.
Yeah.
And in the summers, she would work as a secretary for the detectives. And one day, Otis Stewart, came out, and I said, "What's a guy got to do to get a paycheck around here?" And Donna was standing there. She said, "You got to be 21." I said, "I am 21." Well, I wasn't. I was 19, I think, at that time. So Terry Beach and I, we both wanted to ask her out. And I can't remember if we flipped a coin and I won or whatnot, but we just started dating then and never quit.
Yeah. What a great lady she was.
Oh,
yeah.
Man. Miss her every day.
I know you do. And you have children. And when did y'all get married?
We got married in 76.
76.
July 10th of 76.
Yeah. And how many children?
3 kids. Got 11 grandkids, maybe.
11 grandkids. And I ask, I know most of them, but I'm, for the sake of those who are listening and maybe not know you like I do, you got a great family.
Well, Lord's blessed us.
Yeah, they have. Well, you worked on the farm, you did the dairy, but now life rolled on. You got children coming up, and at some point, I don't remember when this was, but at some point you decided to be in the restaurant business. Am I skipping too much? Is there something happening between that?
Well,
because I don't really know.
The 80s were tough, and the early 80s, and I'm selling feed. I'm borrowing money from the bank, selling feed on credit, and one day I got I saw I was overdrawn in the bank about $3,000. You know, I'm in my 20s then, and I got notice where some farmers had filed bankruptcy on us that owed us money, and I was kind of at the end of my rope. I'll be honest with you. I was headed to Nashville to pick up a load of feed, and I almost planned on not coming home. I thought, you know, I've got $500,000 life insurance. If that truck just veered off into one of those concrete embankments, most likely I'd solve all the world's problems, or all mine anyway.
Wow.
And when I got to Purina Mills that day, I was kind of not in a good place.
Yeah.
And walked into a break room, and where you wait on your feed. There wasn't any. There's usually newspapers or magazines. It's like somebody come in and cleaned the place up.
Right.
And I see over on the table there was a stack of some pamphlets. So I walked over there, and it was a little Christian tract.
Yeah.
And I read that thing, and you know, next thing I knew, I was on my knees and said, Lord, I don't have anything to offer you but me.
Yeah.
But if you'll take me, I'll serve you. And I mean, everything changed at that point.
Well, hallelujah.
I came home and told Donna, I said, we're going to church Sunday. And she said, well, me and the kids been going to church. I said, well, I'm going too. And so it's been a blessing. But at that point, I knew, I mean, I owed Commerce Union Bank $150,000, you know, and didn't know how I was going to pay them. It was all signature, and so I just I was looking to be like maybe open up a convenience store.
Right.
And I was in the bank. Some guys walked in, and they had started Elrod's.
I remember Elrod's
burgers.
Yes.
Well, come to find out, they'd run out of money, and they needed about $25,000 to get that Elrod's opened up down in Florence.
Right.
So they loaded me up, hauled me to Florence, and told me said, you know, if you can help us out, if you want to get in at $25,000, you can have a fourth of it. And I thought, man, how am I going to come up with this? But I did, and I don't know if you remember or not, Elrod's hamburgers down there just went crazy. 99-cent burger, 49 or 59-cent fry, and a 59-cent drink. I think we added a chicken sandwich, and that little old box of a building did over $100,000 a month in sales for 11 months straight.
That's amazing.
It was crazy.
Well, it was a great concept. At the time, the timing was good. It was a great concept, and Elrod had that image.
Yeah.
And it was just a great concept.
And so those guys wanted to go further. They wanted to make it a national chain, and they offered me a buyout, and so bought out and came down here and bottom of the hill out by David Crockett Park, and we built the first O. Henry's Burgers and Ice Cream.
Okay, so you got bought out by the guys.
Yeah.
And that gave you seed money to start your own thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's how that started. Okay.
That's it. And we opened up down there, and it's unbelievable the problems. I'll tell you something funny. I forgot the office place that was in town then. Joe, he was an art teacher.
Yeah, Joe. Gosh.
His mom and dad owned this little office supply.
Yes. I'll think of it in a minute.
And we were ready to open up, and we didn't have cash registers, so I went up there, and she wouldn't sell them to me on credit. So I wrote her a check, a hot check, and I thought, oh my goodness, we got to do at least $1,150 so I can cover that check. but we did and got open, and rest is history.
You know, a lot of great things happen when people take a chance.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard to have that courage sometimes to take that chance. So, well, hey, we have phone calls.
Okay.
And we may have somebody that's got a question or
All right.
or have a comment. Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. Was that Douglas?
Yes, Mr. Douglas. Mr. Douglas.
Sure enough.
Yes.
Joe Douglas.
Thank you, Miss Janet. That's Joe Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joe Douglas. I could not think of it. And you know, I worked for him.
Did you really?
You know, he had a little sign shop at one time.
Okay.
Back in the back there, kind of back behind where the post office alley is back there, and it was a short period of time, but that was back when you hand painted the signs.
Wow.
And the lettering and all that kind of stuff, and I did some sign painting for him way back when.
They were great folks.
He was good to me at school. He could have failed me without any question, but he let me pass.
Amen to that.
Let me pass. Well, so the original O. Henry's was where now?
It was right off the hill. It's down there where the Frisbee Park is now. Right off, just right down from the funeral home.
I had forgotten about it being right there.
And we were looking for locations, and Bob Smith, Bob used to have a little burger joint right at the park entrance called Parkway, I think. That was probably right before we got here.
Okay.
But Bob told us, he said, I used to sell burgers down there for 15 cents or...
Yeah.
He said, I did $100,000 a year down there.
Really?
Because I was worried about that location.
Yeah.
And nothing else was out there, but it was a good little store, good little restaurant,
Yeah. Now, was it mostly a drive-through?
It was just a double drive-through.
Just a double drive-through.
And
yeah, I was trying. For some reason, I can't remember it like I think I should.
It was just a little block building, concrete floor.
Yeah. Now, were you in there? You were in there working.
Oh yeah. We, sometimes we tried breakfast for a while and it just didn't pan out. But we stayed in there many hours a day.
Many hours a day. Well, and through this, I mean, there's lots of trials and tribulations with owning a business.
Sure.
And the restaurant business probably more than most.
Sure.
What are some of your favorite experiences with the coming and going of folks, the restaurant business, that kind of thing?
We had the dairy for 10 years, and one day I thought, I pounded the concrete 10 hours a day in the milk barn.
Yes.
And I said, now I'm pounding concrete. I'm not different. I'm not having to deal with cattle, but I'm dealing with people.
Yes.
And But some of the neat things, people would be sitting there when we opened, and pull up to the window and say, "Man, I just woke up this morning craving one of those bacon cheeseburgers. I just had to have one." And we had ladies, had some nurses when they would, I guess, get off work or whatnot, they'd want a chiller, you know.
Oh, the chillers, yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, we cheated a little bit. We had an old Dairy Queen manual that gave us recipes.
Oh, really?
So we altered those recipes quite a bit, but
gave you something to go by.
And the reason people liked the ice cream so much is at first we were blending two different butter fats to come up with a 7% butter fat. Now, what you get today is probably 2.5% butter fat in soft serve ice cream.
Really?
We were serving a 7%, and which made it extra rich and creamy.
Oh, yeah, we remember.
And then at one point, Metagold started making a 5% for us, and that was a blessing there.
Yeah.
That we didn't have to blend it and all that.
How cool is that? Yeah, you remember? I'd forgotten about the chillers.
Yeah. The guy that put the Dairy Queen in, I pulled in there, I don't know, and he was fussing. Everybody pulls up, wants a chiller. They don't know what a blizzard they, you know. But
that reminds me of a story. A friend of mine, and he won't mind me telling this. I don't think he will anyway. I'm going to tell it. You know, and I know you know him. You know Jeff Marston.
Sure.
Here in town. We've been long time buddies. His wife and my wife are first cousins.
Okay.
Donna, and we've spent a lot of time together over the years, way back when. And we were pulling up, and he wanted to get one of those ice cream desserts. Well, you know, Dairy Queen has the Blizzard.
Right.
Right. And now Sonic has the Blast.
Yeah.
The Sonic Blast. You had the chiller, right? Well, I forget which place we were at, but Marston rolled his window down to order, and he ordered a Blastard. He got the two.
Got them all
got
mixed
them mixed
up.
and ordered a Blastard. Anyway,
man.
so you, what year was it that you opened that?
86.
86. Okay.
And I was pretty young in the Lord. I got very involved in church and got a little puffed up. I'd been saved a couple of years, and they came to me and asked me to teach a Sunday school class.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, well, they must think a lot of me. And so I found out later it was the 7th and 8th grade boys' Sunday school class, and they couldn't find anybody to take it. So they said, let's get Lewis to do it.
Let's get Lewis to do it.
I had boys, you know, how they gleek on each other. And then I had one kid, he'd bring some kind of noodle and suck it up his nose and spit it out his mouth. You know what 7th and 8th graders do.
Oh, my gosh.
But I had a big.
Now, what church were you involved in?
That was at First Baptist.
First Baptist, okay. Yeah.
And
well, I knew you were a Baptist.
I felt called to do student ministry.
Yes.
And so I left First Baptist, went to First Baptist in Loretta.
Yes.
I spent some time at New Prospect.
Yeah, that was, yeah, okay.
And then my first full time, I mean, it's all full time, but I wasn't bivocational. I went to First Baptist in Pulaski, and I was there about 8 years when the Lord really, my heart was really pulled toward mission work.
Yeah.
And all that happened in the 90s. Hurricane Mitch just devastated Central America, Nicaragua, Honduras, mostly, and I got involved in going on a team down there for disaster relief, and then I got involved in leading teams down there, and man, I think it blessed Donna's heart, because I came home from one of those trips. I remember every day the rain would chase us out. We'd be down there working, just trying to put up a little shelter, because these people they had nothing.
Yeah.
And rain would chase us out. We'd jump on the back of the truck and slip and slide out of this little makeshift village. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw there was a little mother. She had a baby in her arms and a two-year-old standing by her side, and she had this piece of a tarpaulin trying to shed the water off. And I mean, it broke my heart. I started crying. I think I cried for 2 days. I came home and I told Donna, I said, we're going to move. She said, where? I said, Nicaragua. And,
oh, my goodness.
And bless her heart, she said, can we pray about this a while? I said, well, sure. But I said, we're going. And at that time, I tried to get in every mission organization I could, and I didn't have enough education, or my kids were too old. Just a lot of different rules, so nothing worked. And in 2002, I was serving over in Pulaski, and the Lord had given me this "When Will We Cry" song, and it's kind of amazing. I never got to go back to Nicaragua, and I had a pastor call me and say, hey, we're going to Guatemala. I said, why don't you go with us? I said, where is Guatemala? And he told me, and I said, nah, I don't think so. Thanks, and hung up. As soon as I hung up, the Lord just call that guy back. Called him back, and I said, I'll go. So
wow.
That's when we started doing a ministry in Guatemala that we did for about 15 years.
Yeah. How many trips and people have you taken down?
Oh my, I have. I went from January to about July. I would go back and forth every other. So for 6 months out of the year, it was every other week. I was either flying in or flying out.
Yeah.
And so we had, I don't know, just hundreds and hundreds of teams, and
that's something that I've never felt called to do.
Sure.
And good Lord willing, if he did give me that burden, I hope I would do it. But I haven't had that. That's just not been my calling.
Well, and that's.
But so I'm in the dark a little bit about what that's like down there. I'm totally. I've heard people talk about going to the mission field, and here you've been so many times, and you're in that. So you go to Guatemala. What is it that you do when you're there?
Well, when I was actually down there serving at an orphanage for a couple of years, I knew I was in the right country, but I knew that the Lord had something more. And so one day I meet a guy named Ellie, and Ellie was just a national pastor, and actually he wanted me to ride with him to the border so we could break the law.
Yeah.
If you don't have a permanent visa in that country, every 90 days you have to leave the country and spend 3 days out of it, and then you can come back. Well, a lot of those missionaries couldn't afford to do that, and so Ellie had a buddy at the border of Mexico and Guatemala, and he would take their passports, get them stamped, and bring them back.
Okay.
So I meet him, and he invited me to ride to the border. Well, I said, sure, let's go. He didn't tell me it was going to be 8 hours, and it was only 120 miles, but the Pan American Highway is one of their better roads, but it's terrible. Yeah. And of course, traffic's terrible. You got a country that's area-wise the size of Tennessee, where we might have 6 million people, and they've got 20 million people.
Wow.
And so anyway, we go to the border, and he explains to me if we get caught, we'd be in trouble. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me this before we started, you know? And
Yeah.
But as we talked, we really felt like the Lord had brought us together. Ellie worked out on the border of Mexico and Guatemala. They planted churches out there. It's a very, very poor and rural area. And so that's what we did. Our trips were very tough at first. I mean, we had a little dormitory, we called it, had a dirt floor, you know, put an air mattress on concrete blocks with boards, that sort of thing. And through the years, we got concrete and we got fans and made it better, but it was still pretty rough as far as Americans coming. But we planted some 35, I think, churches during those years, and we physically built several. We did pastor training. It's an amazing part of my life.
I bet. It sounds like it. It's amazing.
But Ellie passed away with cancer, and the Lord kind of shifted gears. But you know, that's one thing God does. No matter what you're doing, seems like He comes along sometimes and just interrupts you.
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, really? So I thought for the rest of my life, in fact, I really thought once my kids were grown that Donna and I just moved there. And one day, Ellie and I were talking. He said, how much would it cost you to live down here? I said, a couple of $1,000s a month, probably, Ellie. And he said, you know, brother, for that kind of money, we could support 6 or 7 pastors. And that kind of resonated with me, and I thought, you know, we'll just keep doing what we're doing, bringing teams in and out, and then just start supporting some pastors, because you can't even imagine how poor people are when their children are dying from a $2 cup of warmer. Basically would have saved their life.
Yeah.
But those people live on $2 a day.
Yeah.
And I've had, I've shown up at houses where a mother is just wailing when her child has just died.
Yeah. Oh, my.
And I thought if we'd have been there 2 days earlier.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story, though. If We'd been worming, or what we do is we give a little cup drug for parasites. Parasites are
Yeah.
terrible down there, and they're not fun. Believe me, I've had my share. But Ellie said we had a bunch of the wormer left over, and he said, I heard of a village where children are dying, and I said, well, man, I'll send the team home. Let's go. And he said, oh, no, we need to leave very early in the morning. And I didn't ask a lot of questions, but we're deep in the jungle. And I'm like, Ellie, where are we going? He said, I'll tell you in a moment. And we come to this huge ravine. He says, oh, praise the Lord. He said, we're almost there. And I said, well, good. It's getting dark in the jungle, you know. And
Yeah.
And I said, where's the bridge? He said, this is the bridge. It was a swinging bridge that vehicles drive across.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, Ellie, I'm not going across this thing. I said, how old is this? He said, oh, it's very old. He said, that's why I know it's very strong. So he offered to let me get out, and he'd go first, and I could walk across. And I thought, if we're going to die, I'd rather me and you die together than me have to stay out here in the jungle by myself. So we start creeping across this swinging bridge, and the creaking and cracking and all that. And
Oh my goodness!
finally, we make it though, and we worm kids till about 3 a.m. and left out the next day. So it
And
turned
you had
out
to go back across that thing.
that thought hit me. I'm like, when we got through worming that last child, I thought, oh no, we got to go back across the bridge. Anyway, but we made it. God protected us, and
That's incredible. That's incredible. You know, I've knew or have known that you were involved in the mission and the mission trips. I'd kind of forgotten about it, to be honest. Now, are you still doing that at all?
well, after Ellie died, I met a guy named Pastor Jimmy Mendez from El Salvador, because with Ellie gone, things became a little more difficult in Guatemala, and you know, you don't want to. You need somebody that knows, that's very wise about any conditions going on when you're down there.
Yeah.
And so I went to El Salvador, and Jimmy and I felt like, you know, the Lord had opened that door, and so we started taking teams there. A little different work, a little easier than we were used to, but it was still good ministry. And I was down there in a prayer meeting,
Yeah.
and I felt the Lord speak to my heart to plant a cowboy church in Giles County.
Okay.
And I literally said, "You got to be kidding me."
Yeah.
I said, "God, you know my wife's got cancer. I've been doing all this. I mean, you know, what's not enough?" And I got back to my room later on, and I said, "Okay, God, I'll do it. I got to have some help. You know, I don't know."
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was in the fall of 17, I think, and we planted Stillwater's Cowboy Church the next Easter, and we'll be 6 years old today. So, long story short, of course, COVID hit. Those countries shut down.
Yes.
And we went, I took our first international team from Stillwater's Cowboy Church last spring to Salvador.
Okay.
So
So through that church, you're still involved in missions.
yeah, always will be. It's in my heart.
Well, I had a quick question about your time in the mission field down there, and it was simply this: how well is Christianity received in areas like that? And I've always just been kind of curious about that.
Well, in those countries, you're either, they call it Catholic or Christian. It's different than here, but the people are very warm and loving for the most part, and all I would usually do is, when you're talking to somebody and you see you're not making any progress, just give them a little New Testament that they can read, if they can read, or have somebody read it to them. And we had a lot of success that way.
Sure.
We did go one time to a village, and that I was kind of like the barking dog. "Come on, Ellie, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go." And he said, "Well, maybe it's best as I go first, you know." And he didn't tell me it was going to be dangerous, but I just kept pushing him. So finally he said, "Okay, let's go." And we get to a place called Las Mercedes, Guatemala, right on the border. The river borders it in Mexico.
Yeah.
And that was the area that the revolution actually began and ended. It ended with enough of of our soldiers and the Guatemalans, killing enough of them they fled. So we show up at this little village, and then we find out that these people had just gotten their land back, but they were the rebels of the revolution.
Oh my!
And we pull up to a school, 56 kids and one teacher, and in an old tractor shed, dust was 6 inches deep. And so, you know, as a gringo, you always just take pictures and show the kids their picture, and I'm doing that, and Ellie's talking to the teacher, and, you know, I look up, and my goodness, there's a crowd of men circled, and I had a little bad feeling, so I walked over to Ellie, and I says, "Everything okay?" He said, "Brother, start praying. They're going to kill us." I said, "Really?" He said, "Go pray." Man, that'll help your prayer life out.
I can't imagine.
They thought we were spies of the government, and that's since I was an American, he was Guatemalan. But of course, they didn't kill us. They actually were about to execute us. And one guy spoke up. Ellie was crying and naming off everybody that he was related to, because where he grew up was not far from there.
Yeah.
And finally, this one man spoke up, and he said, "This guy's telling the truth. I know his family." And so they told us we could leave.
Wow.
But they said, "Don't ever come back." And here I am, you know, just being me. And I said, Ellie, ask him if we can pour concrete floor for their school, because those kids were sitting in dust.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, the guy put his hand back on his pistol, and he said, "I know who you are, and if you say you're going to do this, you better do it, or we'll come find you."
Really?
So I told Ellie, I said, "I'm going home. You can hire some people and come out there and get that done." But it opened up. We got to come back and share the gospel after we poured this concrete floor.
Wow.
And it's a pretty neat place.
Wow. Well, we have run up against the clock, unbelievably enough.
Wow.
Can you believe that hour went that fast?
I guess
amazing.
I talk more than.
No, man, it's been so interesting, and there's so much more we could talk about. So much more. Lewis, you've been a great friend. I love you. And,
Thank you.
Love
you
your
too.
family, and just think of the world of you. And praise God for you. Okay.
Well,
Hope you
Amen.
can come back sometime. Okay.
Love to. Thank you for having me.
We're
Jim.
gonna have to sign off and let the other guys take over, buddy.
All right. Thank
God
you.
bless, man.
You
See
too.
you.
Not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad.